Hi guys, welcome to another Monday night study. Tonight I wanted to go over some of the prophecies. We've talked about them a little bit over the years. Um, they're in detail in my book, Ancient Prophecies Revealed. But since it looks like a piece of one from Obadiah is actually being fulfilled with this Gaza war, I wanted to bring your attention to it again and make sure we understand it real well and know what we're looking for. Last Thursday we had our normal Q&A, and in our normal Q&A we talked about it a little bit, and I wanted to go into just a little bit more detail. And so let me find my information here. And let's just go to Obadiah. And actually, before we do that, what's going on, if you haven't been paying attention, is that as normal, Gaza has been firing rockets at Israel. This happens every so often. Israel refrains, destroys some of the places that the rockets come from. And it's basically political power. So what's going on is Hamas is a radical Islamic terror group. It's also the official government of the Gaza Strip. And if it attacks Israel, Israel tries to show restraint. Number one, because of the extreme political pressure of the rest of the world. And that's somewhat doable if Gaza, or anybody from that matter, Hezbollah, or whoever, is firing rockets without guidance systems, because most of the rockets will just hit the dirt and that'll be it. But once anyone, Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran, anybody, has actual missiles that have guidance systems of some sort to hit their targets even half the time, it then becomes an unacceptable risk and has to be dealt with. And we know that, and it's been coming this way. And at this point, they have a lot of the same kind of missiles, but they also have a few of the newer missiles with guidance systems. So this has to be taken care of. And at this point, you have the powers, the main powers, which is Russia, China, and the United States, usually step in and say, you have to do this, or you can't do that, or send in peace troops, or whatever. At this particular point, China is not interested. They're dealing with their own things. Russia is possibly involved in a Ukraine situation. We'll just call it that at the moment. So they're not interested in doing anything at the moment. And over here in the United States, the Biden administration, they might be relooking at it now, but the last time I heard had said something like, let the powers over there deal with it. So that sounds to us like a cop-out. We're not coming to Israel's defense, for instance, but that's okay at this point. That creates a scenario where Russia, China, and the United States are saying, you deal with it. Do whatever happens, we're busy. So the political pressure then is off. The only other political pressure is from the Muslim nations around Israel, who really don't like Israel. And so what's going on then at this point, even the Muslim nations in that area are scared of Iran, what Iran might do. And Iran has proxies in Syria and working with Hamas in Lebanon, and not Hamas, excuse me, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. And everybody knows who they're working for. So at this point, with everyone being understandably terrified about Iran getting nuclear missiles and all this stuff, and these are kind of the proxies, at this point, like if I was Saudi Arabia or Syria or Iraq or anybody in that area, it's Iran is one thing, but if Iranian people with missiles are also in 5 or 6 other areas, that should make you very nervous. So at this point, if Israel takes care of the problem with Gaza, not much is going to be said, because it's going to be a step in neutralizing Iran, which is a threat to them also. So in other words, you've got China, United States, Russia, and most of the Muslim states that are okay with Israel doing what's necessary, at least for the moment, to a point. So in other words, that great political pressure is off. Now, anciently, the ancient law of Israel is, as far as wars go, there's two types of wars, and you see this in the law of Kings. There is a war of command, sometimes called a holy war, and it's when God has ordered you to do something. You don't ask the Senate or the Sanhedrin, rather, for permission, you just do it. The other one is when it's not a war of command, something God has commanded. Like, for instance, if your neighbor gets into a fight and you want to go help them out, join the war on a certain side, then at that point, the king doesn't just do whatever he wants. He has to go to the Sanhedrin and get it approved. So there's those kind of wars and the others. Incidentally, it's interesting that a war that has to be approved by the Senate, women and children don't fight. It's just the army and the men. If it's a war of command, everybody takes action because it's usually an invasion or something. So wiping out the Canaanites is one command, and that's a whole different story. It's not genocide. It's removing the paganistic parts of the Canaanites, and there's a lot to that story. But the other one is if you are attacked. So if you're attacked, it's a war, a holy war, or a war of command, and the king is supposed to go forth and take care of the problem. What happens is you destroy the enemy and you take the land that the enemy attacked you from, annex it, and it becomes part of Israeli territory. And you can understand the point of this. The next time they attack, if they do, they always attack the borders, but the new border is going to be way over there. Our citizens are more protected. So that's just the standard way of doing things. Israel has a habit of giving things back. But they're doing it exactly the way the ancient law is. Because one of the laws is when you besiege a city to destroy it, you besiege it on three sides. You let the back be unbesieged. So if there's someone there that doesn't want to be there, being forced to be there, they can, when someone's not looking, sneak out the back. And anybody that flees out the back, they just let them go, because you can hunt down an individual terrorist or an individual enemy of the state or whatever later. But you want to protect all the civilians, and that's the situation. So that's always been the case with the ancient law. So now what's going on is the same kind of thing. I figured this was just one more of these kind of skirmishes, which isn't really amounting to anything biblically or prophetically, except for the fact that Netanyahu made the comment that anybody that attacks them, wherever that is, they're going to go in and eliminate the problem and then annex that territory, and it will become part of Israeli territory, period. Now, if he reneges on this, then this skirmish is just another skirmish. It's not part of a biblical prophecy. If he takes this area and keeps it, it could be the fulfillment of Obadiah, which we'll look at in a minute, unless 5 or 10 years from now, some other Israeli senator or somebody says, we really ought to give that land back to them. That's what happened in 2005 with Ariel Sharon. If that happens, then this is just a dress rehearsal, because the entire thing will happen over again, because it's prophesied in Obadiah. But as we'll see in a minute, there's a couple of reasons why, even if we have 10 or 20 years, this looks like it really might be out for a couple of specific reasons. So let's first go to Obadiah, and we will look at this. So here is Obadiah. Now, when we look at this, the first thing is about Edom. And people look at this and say, okay, the ancient Edomite Empire was destroyed. It's all over. We're done. Except the ending of Obadiah does not fit. And so a lot of us have thought, well, this is a prophecy against Edom back then, and then end time prophecy. That would fit. However, Edom is talked about in a lot of rabbinical works as being Rome, specifically the Roman Empire, not Roman Catholicism, but the empire, and is possibly connected in thought, their thought anyway, as being part of the Babylonian mystery religion. I didn't give it a whole lot of thought because it very well could be true, but there's nothing really to support that until we had a copy of Gad the Seer. When you get to chapter 2 of Gad, he gives some details, which we'll talk about sometime, that connects the two. So now a lot of us are thinking this might be a dual fulfillment prophecy about ancient Edom and the Babylonian mystery religion. But we will skip over that for now because that's something that either has been totally fulfilled or two separate things. Incidentally, the thing is, most people look at all of these, and whether you understand them or not, they tend to say, well, it had something to do with back then. Either way, it's all over. The rabbis and the Dead Sea Scrolls both teach that the ancient prophets prophesied many things, but only the things that relates to the end times, which is the beginning of the start of the kingdom, that specific time period, are included in the canon. Okay, so Obadiah, the little pieces of Jeremiah, Joel, things like that, have something to do with first coming in the few places that we've seen, but also something with second coming. And sometimes you don't know that. For years I've said, really, even Nahum, because Nahum's not really, I can't see anything in Nahum that's not totally fulfilled and completely irrelevant to our time. But then I found the commentary on Nahum and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they kind of explained themselves, and now I realize I was missing a lot. So another subject, but we'll get to those sometime. But anyway, so here's Edom, and that's verses 1 to verse, I think, 9. Let's see here. So we want to start with verse 15. Now this only has 21 verses, so this might be short unless I just talk too much. So here's the point. The first part of this, we want to look at that. And verse 15 says, "For the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen. As thou hast done, so it shall be done to thee. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head." So what's going on here is there's a certain time when the Lord begins to move and punish the Gentiles for how they treated Israel. Now we know that happens during the tribulation period, and we know it's happened every so often with different things going on, and it's began to happen with Israel coming back. But I want you to notice this: the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is a term for, and we won't get into the specifics of how to prove it because we've done that before, but specifically that 7-year period, that tribulation period. But in this case, notice what this says. It's not because we've just entered the tribulation period. That's not what it says. When the day of the Lord is near, okay? And near is kind of a relevant term. The birth pangs that Jesus talks about in Matthew 24 are referred to by the church fathers and a few other manuscripts as the time of the return of Israel. So in their mind, the birth pangs, when the time of the tribulation is beginning to draw near, starts in 1948 when Israel comes back. So it's been 73 years now. So that's not near in our mind. That's an entire lifetime. But it's much closer than 100 or 200 years or something like that. And when we look at the turn of the ages, it's consistent with the other two ages that we've seen. So the point is, this prophecy coming up is when Israel is between the time when Israel comes back, 1948, and the beginning of the tribulation. It's before the beginning of the tribulation, and that's the main point. And so they're going to be destroyed or whatever. "As you have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually. Yea, they shall drink, and they shall swallow down, and it shall be as though they had not been." So for centuries, the heathen have possessed the Temple Mount, done rituals on the Temple Mount that are not Jewish rituals. They have used it like it's theirs. They've done feasts, and by drink, I'm sure it's not talking about getting drunk. It's talking about some sort of a religious ritual, okay? But the point is, we've had the Alaska Mosque, the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount for centuries, and on his holy mountain, okay? And so it shall eventually be like it has not been. So that whole problem will be erased sometime, okay? And it'll be sometime apparently before the day of the Lord occurs. So, but look at this then. "On Mount Zion shall be deliverance." So someone will come to Mount Zion and deliver it. And this began, of course, in 1967 when they took the Temple Mount. There shall be holiness, and the house of Jacob will possess their possessions. So a time is coming after 1948, before the beginning of the tribulation period, that Jacob comes back into the land. That happened in 1948, and takes the Temple Mount, the holy mountain, and possesses it. And that happened in 67 to a point, not completely yet, or they'd be moving the dome and building a temple and all that kind of stuff. So, but this is going to occur. Now, the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. The house of Esau shall be stubble. Now, this goes back to, again, if we were talking in the first part of this, verses 1 to 14, if you're talking about ancient Esau, then obviously they are stubble, they're gone. But the Edomites were in Edom when the Jews were kicked out of the land of Israel in 135 with the Bar Kokhba rebellion, started that 816-year time of expulsion. That left the land somewhat empty. And a lot of people, and I don't know if I can prove it anyway, but a lot of prophecy scholars say that the remnant of the house of Esau, the Edomites, came in, moved into the area. Today we call them Palestinians. Although Palestinians, the people that are claimed to be Palestinians, do seem to be from that area and also from maybe Lebanon and Syria and surrounding areas. So in time, everybody intermingles and it's just a group. But the basic part is there. And they still think that they own the land, much like Esau did. So it's kind of the same thing. They shall kindle them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken it. That will be interesting. Now, this happens sometime, but now we want to look specifically at verse 19 and 20, because these are the key verses. We want to go really slow and look at these. So let me look at my notes here for a minute just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. So at this point, verse 19, I teach and have taught for many years that verse 19, or the first part of 19, was fulfilled in 1948. And so here's why. Let's look at this careful. So at this point then, verses 15, 16, 17, and 18 tell us that the Gentiles possess the land. They do rituals on the Temple Mount, but Jacob moves in, becomes a fire, and eventually fixes the problem. Well, Jacob, Israel moved in 1948, the Temple Mount in 1967, and the problem kind of continues. So what happened in 1948? Well, they were supposed to create a nation, but at first it was supposed to be the entire area of ancient Israel. Then they decided to create a two-state solution divided at the Jordan River and have Israel on one side and what was called to be called Transjordan on the other, one Jewish, one Arab. Well, then there's a war, and of course they keep saying two-state solution. Now we have actually Jordan and West Bank and Gaza Strip and Israel, so it's a four-state solution at the moment, and they still want to divide Israel and make another two-state solution. So it's kind of an odd situation there, but that's what's going on at the moment. So verse 19, Israel becomes a nation, 1948. What happens? The people that are there were told by the surrounding Arab countries, pick up your stuff and flee. We will come in, we will wipe out the Jews, then you'll get to go home and continue life as normal. And that's basically what they were told. So people picked up and left. The Jews, however, won the war, which was prophesied in Scripture. And then what happens at this point then is that the people that left are displaced. They really don't have a home to come back to because it's another country now. And so that creates this refugee problem. Now, they could have been absorbed by other areas, and they kind of were to a point. And this is what happens in verse 19. So these people there, and where Israel, central Israel would be in central, what we call Israel today, they go to three places. So they of the south, in the southern part, actually take off and go to the Mount of Esau. Now, of course, that would be Jordan. Okay, and some people did pick up and go to Jordan, the ones especially along the border. The logical place, get out of the place and go to a safe place, Jordan. Okay, other people, go to the plain of the Philistines. Now, if you know anything about the Philistines, you remember Judges, I think it's chapter 14 and 15, or 13, 14, and 15. Remember the story of Samson. Samson was a native of either Gaza or Gath, I can't remember, but down there in the Philistine area. And the Lord used him to destroy the ancient Philistines. Incidentally, that's where the concept of Palestine gets its name, from the Philistines. Something the Romans did when they dispersed the Jews. So some of these people go to the area of where the Philistines used to be and stay there. Well, that becomes Gaza Strip. Now, Gath, the ancient capital, is actually right outside of that in Israeli territory, the way it is right now anyway. But it's the ancient area. So Gath was the capital, I believe, or at least one of the large city-states. And then today, Gaza City is the capital of Gaza. But now let's go on. And then another group of people, it says, come and possess the fields of Ephraim. Now, if you get a map and you look at where Ephraim was in that area, you'll realize that this becomes the West Bank. So in the process of time, and I'm not saying it all started instantly in 1948, but in 1948, Israel moved in, and then these three things happened. People groups went to the Gaza Strip, or went one place and created the Gaza Strip, went to another place, created the West Bank, and went to another place, Jordan. And that happens. Now, later on, this part has not happened yet, to my knowledge. Benjamin shall possess Gilead. Now, the tribe of Benjamin, I don't know that they've been found. And there's been nothing that I know of them migrating to Israel. But Gilead is an ancient land close by the Golan Heights. Now, there's a series of prophecies about what happens between Israel and Syria involving the Golan Heights between the time of the second return of Israel, 1948, and the second return of the Messiah. And it's rather detailed. So that's one set of prophecies in the Bible. We're not talking extra biblical at this point. So at this point then, but somewhere along the line, the tribe of Benjamin comes and possesses Gilead. So they will have to buy or conquest take the northern west part of Jordan. So that's something that's not on the radar yet, but something that's happening. Apparently connected with this stuff. Notice if the creation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which took time, and they didn't both happen at the same time either, the going to Jordan was pretty instant, but the others took time. This other part will take a longer time yet. So what's going on? So let's look at this. Verse 20 is the key that we want to look at connected with this current Gaza war. So again, Gaza's done these skirmishes, Israel and Gaza, a number of times, and it doesn't amount to anything. But somewhere along the line, it may not this time either, but somewhere along the line, when you get missiles that hit their targets every time, and their targets are buses of kids and hospitals and who knows what, it can't be allowed. You can't even take the risk of missiles being there. So it has to be occupied by someone, period. And the ancient law is pretty specific. And this is what's going to happen. Now, verse 20 says, the captivity of the host of the children of Israel. So those are the Israelites that were captive, in other words, expulsed by the Romans, that came back in 1948. So modern Israel, okay, will possess the land of the Canaanites. Now look at this just for a second. Now the land of the Canaanites at different times went in more or less, but the Canaanites dwelt in Israel on the west coast, and it was mainly, they didn't go too far north, but it was, do I want to say about 2/3 of Israel. So in other words, from part of the northern part of Israel all the way down to the Sinai, that's all Canaanite territory. So for this to happen, Israel has to take and hold, annex, and keep the Gaza Strip. Now, I thought this happened way back when, but then in 2005, under Ariel Sharon, it was forsaken, which is another prophecy based in Zephaniah, that Gaza would be forsaken. Not conquested, but just given away. So first time that's ever happened. So anyway, again, no matter what happens now, if 5 years from now they give it back again, then this is not the prophecy. But we're going to see something interesting here. But they possess the land of the Canaanites. But it adds this, even as far as Zarephath. Now you remember Zarephath was the city where Elijah went and healed the widow's son. And long story there. But to make it short, the point is Zarephath is, the old ruins of Zarephath is right outside the city of Seraphon, Lebanon. So in other words, when they do this, I'm assuming it's the same time, but it might be two different, wars or something like that. But they wind up possessing all of the Canaanite land. So that would be Gaza Strip all the way up to Zarephath, which means they take and hold southern Lebanon. Now, there have already been 2 wars to go in and take southern Lebanon, and in both times they've given the area back. But again, when Hezbollah says we need to destroy Israel and we have even more advanced rockets now, if you keep letting them do that, eventually they will kill a lot of people. So that has to be stopped somewhere along the line. Now the political pressure is off. Now it's getting too dangerous with guided missiles. Good time for this to happen. So notice that Seraphon, Lebanon is between Tyre and Sidon. So the point I always make with this when you look at it is right now, let me see if I can see myself in the, okay. So right now the border of Israel, say, is right here. In the millennial reign, it's way up in the middle of Syria. So it's way up here, okay? When this is done, the new border of Israel will be here in southern Lebanon. So if it's not in the millennial reign and it's not here, and to my knowledge, they've never been that far north, this happens again when the day of the Lord is near, but not here yet, which is our time. So this has to happen in the near future. Even unto Zarephath. And the captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Zarephath, shall possess the cities of the south. So this is an ancient Hebrew word for Spain. So we're talking about the captivity of Jerusalem again from the Canaanites, or not from the Canaanites, from the Romans, because this didn't happen with Nebuchadnezzar. They all went to Babylon. At this point, when the Romans expulsed them, some of the captivities of Jerusalem, along with a lot of the extra books, went to Spain. So Spain and Germany and England actually were major centers of Jewish learning for centuries. And then in the 1200s, England expelled the Jews. And then in 1492, same year that Columbus set sail, the Jews were expulsed. And at that point, those refugees from Seraphon basically had 3 options. You could convert to Roman Catholicism, you can leave the country, or you could die. Those are your options. And so a lot of them officially converted to Roman Catholicism, and the Jews referred to them as pigs, and so it's kind of interesting. But they did that just to stay there. But the majority of them left and went to other countries. And the Israelis know who they are, and some of them are beginning to think about going back to Israel. But it's always been dangerous and a hard road. If Gaza is gone and Hamas is gone and Hezbollah is gone and Iran is neutralized, it might be a much safer place. Remember also, somewhere along the line of all this, we have Jeremiah chapter 49, which talks about the coast of Elam being set on fire. Elam and Persia combined to form Iran. So where the Bashar nuclear things are and along the coast, something happens there, it becomes a fire, and it causes not just a fire, but a problem to occur so that everyone has to flee the area. That sounds like radioactive stuff. So there's no nation where refugees of Iran don't come. After that's cleaned up, they go back home and they become a seat for learning for the Lord. That may or may not be the millennial reign, but at that point, Iran is a pretty decent place again. So again, with all that happening at that point, all the major people taken care of, Iran, terrorist type groups in those countries, in Iran, in Lebanon, in Gaza, and other places. And we have the Psalm 83 war that goes along with that too. And some of these may be separate prophecies for the exact same thing, and others may be different. We'll have to wait and see. But so this is what happens then. They come back and they colonize the Negev. Now, I remember way back when Ariel Sharon was, I think it was Ariel Sharon, yeah, when he was still premier, he made the comment about colonizing the Negev, that it was something they would like to do. And about that time, it's wilderness or desert area, so there's no water, you can't do it. You just flat can't do it. But the Israelis invented a system that allows you to pull moisture out of the air. And that's okay because the seas evaporate. So you're just kind of moving water around, but instead of that from the atmosphere, using the air to move the water around. And it became a really good thing. I mean, you can have, and they were very cheap to make. I don't know how they work, but I just remember that happening. And then Ariel Sharon made the comment, now we can actually begin to colonize the Negev. And if everything was perfect and no wars, no major problems, no viruses or anything like that, then it should be able to be finished by 2025. Now, of course, that didn't happen. There were some wars. There were all sorts of things that happened. I don't know that they've went at all in that direction, but they will eventually. And a lot of the Sephardic Jews, for lack of a better term, certain groups will come and migrate there. So this is what's really interesting. Now, this could be all sorts of time, but let me share you. This is one thing we mentioned, and someone asked last Thursday what scriptures are like that. The thing is, what connects this is the Gaza Strip at one point voted in their government, and the government took the name Hamas. Now, that means one thing in Arabic, but in Hebrew, Hamas means violence. Now, there's a lot of Old Testament passages that talk about violence being done, violent people, and it just means violence. It just happens to be the word Hamas. But there are a handful of scriptures, we're going to look at two of them. There are a handful of scriptures that seem to indicate there is a group called violence or a group called Hamas. They exist in the end times. They're anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel. They want to attack places, even the holy places like the Temple Mount. They seem to be headquartered in Gaza, and they are eventually destroyed by the Lord. So it's an interesting set of prophecies. So let me look at that. Let me see here. Well, let me just bring this over here. This will be easier than looking it up on eSword. This is an article I'm writing for Prophecy Watchers. Can I do this? Okay. It's on the 8.5 by 11, so it's smaller. I apologize for that. But here is one of those in Amos chapter 2, or Amos chapter 6, rather. And it says, it's talking about lots of things. Cross to Calneh and see, and from there go to Hamath. Hamath is in Syria. Go down to Gath of the Philistines. That's Gaza Strip area. Are these kingdoms any better? Are they better than these kingdoms, rather? Is their border better than yours? You will put evil far away and cause the seat of violence to come near. So at a certain point, there is a seat of violence, or the seat of Hamas is going to come near because it's allowed. It's an evil day, and it's at the border of Gath of the Philistines. So there is an end time group that wants to attack Israel named Violence, that apparently is a governmental structure in Gaza Strip in the last days, if we're reading this right. This other one, I'll just read this other one. This is Ezekiel 7. 1 through 11, and mainly the first and the last parts of this. We'll just read this. It says, the morning is come to thee, O thou that dwellest in the land. The time is come. Notice this. The day of trouble is near, and not the sounding again on the mountains. Now, again, if the time of trouble is the time of Jacob's trouble, which is the 7-year tribulation, this is not in the tribulation. This is before it begins. This is the same language that we see in Obadiah, excuse me. And it goes on about God pouring out his fierce anger. But look at this last part here. Behold the day, behold it is come. The morning is gone forth, the rod has blossomed, and pride has budded. Violence, or Hamas, again, it could just be violence in general, but it sounds like a group rising up to do something specific. So Hamas is risen up to be a rod of wickedness. And here's the judgment that God gives. None of them shall remain, nor their multitude, nor any of theirs. Neither will there be any wailing for them. So again, politically, there would be an outcry, normally, Muslim to Muslim. But if they're connected with Iran and everyone is scared of Iran, if that's really the case, at this particular point, there's not going to be an outcry because it's just a little too dangerous. That we can do that later. So it's really interesting, some of the things going on here. And I'll go ahead and close that. But so I wanted to look at this. So in other words, there is a time when the day of the Lord, the 7-year tribulation, is about to begin. And that doesn't mean this year. It could be 5 or 10 or even 20 years from now. But we're in that area of the end of the age. But it's before the tribulation period that Israel comes back. The dwelling peoples flee to Jordan, to Samaria and the Philistines, and create the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And then eventually Benjamin comes and settles in Gilead. Hopefully that's peaceful. The captivity of the host of the children of Israel possessed the entire land of the Canaanites, which is the Gaza Strip up north, but this time it goes all the way to Seraphond, Lebanon. So they take ancient Tyre. Again, the same reason probably applies. If Gaza is neutralized, and I mean that in a good way, it no longer fires rockets, it's peaceful, Hezbollah is going to have a problem. And Lebanon has consistently shown that they can't control Hezbollah. Well, then Israel will. They will take and hold southern Lebanon. And it becomes a center point for Jews that are there. One of the other prophecies actually talks about there's so many Jews there that it can't hardly contain it. So, and then the Sephardic Jews will come back and colonize the Negev. So all this stuff is in the near future. So again, something that could be going on. So the thing is, like I said before, if this fizzles out, or if it works, but then a few years later, somebody in the Israeli government decides to just give it away again, then the whole process starts all over again. But to know that there is a group called Hamas centered, the seat of that entire movement is in Gaza. They are an anti-Semitic power that the Lord deals with. I suppose they could stay around too, but this is pretty specific. We're getting close to the end of the age, even if it's 40, 50 years away. If this is happening now, the political situation is correct now. Netanyahu, it's what caught my attention to do this, actually said we're going to follow the old ways. Every place that we have to go to stop missiles is annexed and becomes Israeli property. Now, if he sticks to his guns on that, that will begin to fulfill this prophecy. So I just wanted to mention this to you in a few of those scriptures. Again, this has all been from the Bible, not extra biblical, but Hamas, Gaza, all those things. We'll go ahead and stop there for this, and I will go to the chat room and we'll just see if we have any questions. So let me Try that too. If you guys like this format, just let me know, or if this is too confusing or whatever. Because I'm going back looking at some of the other things, especially on Thursdays, we get a lot of comments from all over, so it makes it kind of difficult. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, one person said some people are saying Obadiah. Some people think Obadiah has a tie to America. Yeah, it's and not at all, according to what we just read. It's all about over there. There are some things that do, like I believe Ezekiel 38 makes a definite reference to America, which is the reason why we don't get nuked and completely destroyed, because we're still here at that point anyway. Okay, let's see here. Oh yeah, we're having a lot of rain up here too. I should have known. But anytime we have rain up here in Kansas, that means there's probably a hurricane or something somewhere south. Marianne asked to please pray for the storms in the Texas Panhandle. There's already been some small tornadoes and big storm heading their way. Now we'll get small whenever there's like a hurricane. We'll get little spin-offs and some fairly decent tornadoes in our area. But Kansas, Nebraska is usually where all that stops. So we'll definitely be praying for you. Yeah, Gypsy Girl said if Omar and yeah the Islamic group in our Congress got their way, they'd be giving Palestinians F-35s and Iron Domes. I do not see that happening. If we decide to do that, I see some really bad things for us. So anyway, let's see here. Sue gave us a $25 donation through Super Chat. Thank you very much. Appreciate your support. Israel should have never given Gaza back in the first place. Absolutely. However, it was prophesied in Zephaniah that they would, and it took place. There's a lot of details on that story that we don't have time to go into, but it's yeah, they should have never done it. Do you know the year that excuse me, Artaxerxes? I know it's amazing how you type that and everything changes it. I can't type worth a darn because I'll look at it and it will be perfect, and I'll hit the go button or the return button. I'll look up and I don't know what I just wrote. I mean, it's all garbled. So I do that really bad. Anyway, when Artaxerxes declared the decree for Daniel's prophecy to start, yeah, that should have been 445 BC. We should have a video on that. Actually, that might have been. Sometimes when I do videos about Israel winning wars, if they're really old ones, it's kind of okay. If it's a modern one, it's looked at as being hate speech, and a couple of them have been banned. So actually, we have, if you go to BibleFacts.org, we have a Rumble channel and a Gab channel, and I think I have both of those on there. They're free speech platforms, so they should be safe there. But there's prophecies about the actual target dates of 32 AD for the Messiah's death, the taking back of Israel, 1948, May 14th, and then June 7th of 1967. Those exact dates are prophesied in Scripture. And so that would, you can go back and look those up. Many people have done studies on that. Sir Robert Anderson a ways back, Chuck Missler, Several guys have done that. But yeah, that should be in one of our videos online. Video quality is fantastic. Good. Well, maybe I finally got it figured out. So yeah, part of it was my problem. It was a setting. And then the glitchiness, I think, was either a bad cable beginning to go bad, and or switch. So I got Cat 6 cable, something like $8 to run from the router over to the computer, and I got rid of the switch. And so that eliminated a lot of that kind of stuff. So I did upgrade the computer system. I've been doing that. I try to do that every 2 years or better, and it's been about 2.5 years before things get flaky. And I noticed sometimes I'd plug in the camera and it would be like dark or fuzzy, and I'd unplug it, replug it, and it'd be fine. And that's an indication that the ports are probably, yeah. So anyway, so we're doing good now. Hopefully this will work really well. Let's see, 320 in the chat. Oh, wow. So hit the, oh, we are. I'm seeing 475 at the moment. Maybe it's just the title. Yeah, that's a record for us. Okay, question. There are some who believe that and have good arguments for the Temple Mount being near but not located where the Dome of the Rock is. Is that relevant? It might be, but I mean, the temple gets rebuilt. It's desecrated by the Antichrist. Then another temple is rebuilt in the millennial reign. So I don't know that it makes a difference if they put it in the right spot or not. Obviously, the millennial reign one will be designed by the Messiah. But the fact that one is coming will be interesting. One of the prophecies, though, well, a couple of them, and this might help figure this out. I don't think it really matters. But in Revelation, it talks about to leave out the outer court because it's given over to the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is over. And so the temple court would be the entire Temple Mount area. But if you leave out the outer court, you just have the temple itself could actually set anywhere on there. And then in the last 10 chapters of Ezekiel, which technically should be talking about the millennial temple, but it makes a comment about a wall between the temple and the profane thing that sits on the Temple Mount, which I would assume, unless it's something else, right now I would assume the Dome of the Rock is the only thing on the Temple Mount. So that would lead you to believe that maybe if they created the temple, whether it's where it's supposed to be or not, but on the Temple Mount, and put up a wall between the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock and had them both stay there for a while, might be something that's going on. And that's just a guess, you know, but again, anything future, we don't know for sure about. So I'm just telling you what I think of this and what's going on. Let's see. Question about the Psalm 83 prophecies. If it hasn't been fulfilled yet, doesn't Israel grow after that war? I would definitely assume so. I guess they wouldn't necessarily have to grow, but because in Psalm 83, what's going on, you're not talking about, like, for instance, Syria and Egypt attacking Israel. You're talking about, or in Lebanon, for instance, you're talking about the people in Gabal and the Hagarenes. So you're talking about a group of people in those areas. So it's not the government of Egypt that wants to attack Israel, at least at that point. It's a terrorist group in Egypt. And it's not Lebanon wanting to attack Israel at that point. It's a terrorist group in Lebanon, that kind of thing. So if you do that, you look at Psalm 83, there's actually 10 groups. Your first thought is like, ooh, 10 nations. But it's not nations, it's like terrorist groups in nations. So theoretically, you might have a nation that doesn't like the terrorist group at all, but there's not much they can do about it. So Israel comes in, wipes them out, and then everything can kind of pick up and everybody can have prosperity. So, but that's the thing we're seeing in Psalm 83. I know some people think it's fulfilled and others not, but I think the key to understanding Psalm 83 is the fact that it's a prayer of the prophet Asaph, and he has all these people attacking Israel, And the prayer is, can you please make them like, I forget their names, like Ziba and Genev, I think it is. Anyway, it's the ones mentioned in Judges. Point being that Egyptians, for instance, have always been, and the Egyptians could attack and then be at peace. Then the Egyptians could attack and be at peace, and that could go on forever. The only way to stop that is if there's no Egyptians. Okay, and so they're asking for those terrorist groups that are around, which presumably are all Muslim terrorist, fundamentalist Muslims, to be once and for all like those other nations. So the Canaanites, for instance, were wiped out. There's no Jebusites, there's no Canaanites anymore. There's no nation of the Canaanites to attack anybody, and never will be, because they just don't exist anymore. So, Lord, will you please make our enemies like those? So that prayer at least has not been answered, because you still are surrounded by people that want to attack you. The vast majority of people, I firmly believe, want peace. You know, I really don't care what religion you are. I mean, I do, but I don't want to kill anybody. I want you to be successful. I want me to be successful. I want us to both be able to feed our families. And then I want to be able to talk with you and to convince you why you need to convert to Christianity. That's what I would want to do. And a Muslim should want to do the same. You'd want everybody to be fed and healthy. And then you'd want to talk with me and try to convert me to Islam. That kind of a thing. Nobody really wants weird people running around killing each other. That's the problems we keep seeing, or kept seeing, in the scrolls with the Sadducees and the Pharisees in the 1st and 2nd century BC. Praise the Lord, we finally now have all that ancient history. So that's basically what's going on there with that, I think. And yeah, we've talked about this before. Yeah, Diane says, I believe that Israel will retake Gaza and southern Lebanon. And so, now the Syrian portion definitely is the new border during the millennial reign. So not all of Syria, but up into Syria. So yeah, those are things we definitely need to look for. Next question is, since Paul was a Benjamite, but also a citizen of Rome, perhaps Benjamin represents the remnant of the diaspora that have not yet returned. Might be. I mean, at the very least, if you take it super literally, Benjamin hasn't returned that I know of. So it's either just Benjamin and or representing, like you've said, but either way, it's a group of Jewish people that haven't and will return. Good point. I heard that Lebanon sent 4 missiles toward Israel. 2 fell back to Lebanon. No injuries. Hezbollah is trying to join in now. I hope Israel does take both of them and Gaza back. And I think that's probably one tactic. If you got Israel mad and then you attack from multiple sides, and you could like paint it in the news media as Israel going nuts and they're attacking all of their neighbors, that kind of a thing. So I can see why, unless there's a major problem, Israel is going to stay focused on the Gaza Strip. So if Hezbollah starts doing the same thing, I mean, running down hundreds of rockets, then that'll be documented, and Israel's not going nuts. They're just having a war on 2 fronts. So we'll see what's happening. But I think they're probably trying to goad Israel into doing something. But again, that's the situation. If they're firing the little rockets that only get this far, and this is mainly dirt, and they just kind of randomly hit the dirt somewhere, then you can let that slide for a while. And I think that's what they're doing now. Great information. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I'm glad you all are here. That's a good point, too. With America having the largest contingent of Jews outside of Israel, do you think judgment will come to America and get ready for it here to drive them to the return? That's a possibility. I mean, some anti-Semitism rising up in certain areas to drive the Jews out. Probably if something like that happens, probably along with a stringent socialist communist type movement in the United States, or civil unrest or something along those lines. Um, we have had lots of problems, but this last year has been complicated by the virus problem, and then civil rights type problems, and then other things. And so it's not just a normal year, it's like a bunch of stuff has hit us at once. That might help the situation, it might hinder the situation. So we'll have to see. But yeah, the best thing we can do is pray for revival and the peace of Jerusalem. And there's an ancient epistle of Barnabas. Remember Barnabas that worked with Paul? He wrote a typological prophecy book. It's preserved by the ancient church fathers. But in there, he basically mentions there is, for a mature Christian, there is a threefold witness. And the threefold witness is to know how to lead someone to the Lord. And we do that. Today, we call it the Romans Road. Just show them a few scriptures, prove your point, and then pray with them. Know how to lead someone to the Lord. Know what prophecy has been fulfilled in your lifetime, because that gets the attention of unbelievers. And we need to focus on that and repeat that so that people really start thinking about it. And then thirdly is to guard against evolution being taught in the church. Interesting that that would be the three, but that's what he said. But anyway, the point is that, again, we need to focus on prophecy, but that always is a ends to a means. Prophecy is not just cool because you know what's going to happen. You use it to explain to people God is in control and he's going to do what he's going to do. And you really don't want to be against God. He said specifically, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is where I want you to be. And Jesus said, my yoke is light compared to everybody else's. It's easy. You don't, but you have to follow his directions. I mean, to have his blessing, not for salvation. But we just have to be really careful of that. So I pray that America will have revival. And that starts with us talking to people. I know that sounds overly simplistic, but the whole idea is just talking with people. Have you heard about the Gaza War? Oh, yeah. You realize this could be the fulfillment of Obadiah? Obadiah? That little bitty thing in the Bible? Or somebody's most likely going to say, what is an Obadiah? Oh, it's a book in the Bible. Let me explain it to you. And of course, if you're the first one to tell them this, they're going to say, you're a nut. And then they're going to walk away. But a few other people are going to tell them that. They're going to say, Christians are weird. But then they're going to go home and they're going to turn on the TV and go, wait a minute. How did they know that was going to happen like that? And then they'll come back and ask us, how did you know? Are you psychic or something? No, it's in the Bible. The Bible is very specific in prophecy. And you can begin to show them the same Bible that told you what's going to happen and will tell you what's going to happen tomorrow says that we're destined for hell and we need a savior. And Jesus came to pay the penalty for that. If you accept him as your Lord, you can actually be given the free gift of eternal life. You can live at peace with God and have everlasting life. It's a wonderful thing. And people think that's that Sunday school Jesus stuff. Yeah, but it's the same thing. It's life. It's the same thing that we're experiencing here. So, okay, I talk too much. Let's see. Yeah, Avi's got some good points for saying that. Avi Lipkin, the guy that's organizing the Bible Block Party in Israel, to give Messianic Jews and Bible-believing Christians a voice in the Israeli government. So he really honestly believes, I mean, seriously believes that anti-Semitism will start happening here and will drive the Jews home. It's a spooky thought, but like the other person was saying, we have a large amount of people here, so it's a possibility. Something has to get them to go home. But again, if most of the enemies are gone, they have more area. Maybe that in itself that should help some anyway. Okay, just some general stuff here. 480 in the chat. Yeah, 494 at the moment. Yeah, that is definitely a record for us. And thank you all for coming and being a part of our discussions and teaching. And again, it's really interesting to study what's going on with Gaza. And let's see here. Was the book of Hebrews perhaps written to Essenes at Qumran, where copies of Hebrews found among the Dead Sea Scrolls? Not that I know of, nothing from the New Testament. Um, it's my belief that the Paul wrote the book of Hebrews to the priests in the Jerusalem temple because it makes sense, the whole concept of saying this is about Moses and the law and the priests and this and that. Since the fact that we're all here, you know, those prophecies were fulfilled. You know, the prophecies of Messiah. You know, there's different factions that teach different on it, but you were here and you saw what Messiah did. And there's no way he could not be Messiah, raising dead people, healing blind people. You were here, you saw that. So if that's true, then you know what the rest of the prophecies are going to say. So that means you have a maximum of 15 years to get right with the Lord, to leave the temple service, become Christian, or bad things are going to happen. And I think that's mainly who it's written to, which is exactly what did happen. That's kind of a good question. What's God's expectations on us Gentiles in the support of Israel as everyday people? Or are we irrelevant and just watch and pray and deal with our personal walk in faith? I don't. Any one person might be kind of irrelevant. So you know, you can't go change the world by yourself. But I think as a whole, if we show the love of Christ, a lot of times they think of Christians as being crusaders, you know, killing everybody. And whether that happened that way or not, that's the picture that's painted in everybody's mind. And when you say, I follow the teachings of Jesus, I believe he was the Messiah, he teaches us to love one another, and like it or not, we're brothers. And I want you to come to know Messiah, but that's okay. Right now, do you have enough food? Do you need anything? And actually, when they come to trust you and know that this guy's serious, he really cares for people, then they can actually start listening. And that just takes time, but it mainly starts by acts of kindness and talking to people. And that's basically it. And like Paul says about one person waters and somebody else gets the increase, you might do that to a lot of people and help soften them and never see a result, but someone else might be going around getting all these people saved. So it's just one of those things we just have to keep doing what the Lord has called us to do. Study and then talk. And that's about it. Like Jesus said, his load is actually light. And let's see here. $10 donation. Thank you very much for that. Oh, for the broadcast quality. Yeah, thank you very much. And then Christy Lynn donated $25. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The History Lover says, thank you for modeling how to witness with prophecy. And that's the main thing. I mean, like we always talk about the fact that going back to Daniel chapter 9, it tells you when the Messiah is going to come. Okay. And it, even forgetting about math and the calendar, he comes and he dies. And that's before the prince comes to destroy the city or the sanctuary, rather. And everybody agrees that that was Titus the Roman destroying the Jerusalem temple. So no matter how you look at it, the Messiah had to come before 70 AD, or God is a liar. They say, well, God changed his mind. There's passages where God says, if you do this, I'll help, and if you don't, I'll punish. But it doesn't say that there. It says, like it or not, here's a date. Messiah comes, and after that, destruction of the temple. It's just the way it is. There's no if you do something. And so if Jesus wasn't the Messiah, who was a Messiah in the first century AD? He had to have been there. And it's just one of those things that we listen to. Why did the rabbis, for instance, place a curse on anybody who would read Daniel chapter 9? Because they don't want you to read it. If you just read it and think, again, give or take a decade for the calendar calculations, who cares? But before 70 AD, the Messiah came. You got to do something with that. And then when you see like the Melchizedek document, 11Q13 from the Dead Sea Scrolls, says that Melchizedek is the Messiah. He comes to die for our sins. The event happens one Shemitah after the end of the 9th Jubilee of their age, which is 32 AD. And it says that the Messiah is God. He is our God. And so all the basic teachings are right there in that one scroll, although they're mentioned in many of the other scrolls. So it's amazing just to see that. And those are things our Jewish brothers are beginning to see and realize it's not Pharisee tradition, it's not Orthodox Judaism, but it is Zadok priest stuff. It's Dead Sea Scrolls, which is older than the Jewish groups that we have today. So it's something you got to think about. Wacky Christians didn't invent a story. We got it from the Essenes. So, it's something to think about. And the Messianic movement is growing by leaps and bounds because of evidences like that. So it's very interesting. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, one of the ideas, you can support various Israel charities for Israelis that want to go back, and different things like that. So very, very good point. Dolores gave a $20 donation. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Haven't you said that we are to take prophecy as not being allegorized? Yes. The scriptures are very specific. Now, if he sees a vision, then it's symbolic. So when John saw the seven-headed red dragon, there is no seven-headed red dragon walking around. So it's a dream, and that vision means something. So dreams and visions are riddles. Okay. But outside of that, everything is to be taken literally. If a king died or Jesus healed somebody, a king actually died and was buried, and Jesus actually healed someone. And there might be other things we can take away from that. But yeah, we need to take the entire Bible as being very literal. Okay. Well, that gets us to the end of our group. And yeah, we still have a few minutes if anybody has any other questions. But it's something to look at. So again, just to kind of recap, we should see in the near future if this is the fulfillment of Obadiah. And if not, we'll see the fulfillment of Obadiah anyway. But Israel takes the Gaza Strip. They take southern Lebanon. The new border is Sarafund, Lebanon. Iran is ultimately neutralized, maybe not by Israel, but by something, with the prophecies in Jeremiah 49. So we've got to very much familiarize yourself with Jeremiah 49, Obadiah, Zephaniah chapter 2, Psalm 83, Isaiah 17. Those are the prophecies like the destruction of Damascus, and the Psalm 83 war, things like that. We're speculating on when and how they come together because we don't know, but we need to be focused on them so that when it does happen, we can actually teach people about it. Very, very important. The 70-year prophecy about Tyre, I believe, is the 70 years prior to the Babylonian invasion. Again, however, the way the scrolls are teaching it, it's got something to do with end time prophecy in one way or another. So that would be something to really look at. I thought I had everything all figured out. These prophecies are future and these are just past. But then you look at the way the scrolls teach, and it's like, okay, we need to look at this whole thing together again. Yeah, I don't know anything about the Spain and Morocco. That would be something interesting to look at. Wars and rumors of wars. Okay. Did you see my question about the deaths of Ham and Cush? Wondering if any of the scrolls give details. Nimrod apparently wanted revenge for how they died. It's either them or it was talking about the ancestors like pre-flood. But he's either way. He's trying to take revenge on God for God's judgment of his ancestors. Um, there's a good possibility that Ham and Cush were still alive, because in those days, the pre-flood people lived to be about 900. Immediately after the flood, 400s is normal, about half the lifespan. And then 4 generations into it, something happens, and the lifespans are around two something, 210, something like that. Nimrod actually lives to be 215 and still seems to be pretty healthy. And he ends up getting attacked and killed um, by Esau. His head's chopped off, or at least he's killed by a sword anyway. And at that point, the kingdom completely collapses. There was another collapse prior to that when Elam broke off, but so there's a good chance that he would still be alive, or they had just died, or something like that. So if Ham, um, coming over from the flood, lives about the same lifespan as Shem, that would be 600 years more or less in there. And then 4 generations into that, you've got the 400s, and then you've got Nimrod in that area. So my guess is he's referring to the fathers pre-flood, but either way, he's trying to come against them. So Nimrod dies at that by the hand of Esau, which is actually part of a prophecy. But that takes place, and then the kingdom is destroyed. One of the things that Nimrod did with the kingdom is he would go take it over city state by city state, and he would come in and kidnap the king's sons and daughters. And he would promise the king that if you do exactly what I say, they will be kept without harm and fed, and everything will be fine. If you do not do what I say, I will not kill them. I will torture them. Let me give you some details on exactly what I'm going to do to them. And that's the kind of man Nimrod was. And of course, everyone obeyed. And so when Esau killed Nimrod, he honestly thought the entire kingdom is going to come after me. If I was to kill a president or something, the entire nation would be after me. But in that point, everyone breathed a sigh of relief that Nimrod was finally gone, and they all broke away into their original independence. So it was an interesting thing. It says the house of Nimrod, then, his immediate family and the people that worked for him were enslaved at that point, or imprisoned rather. So that piece of history is from the book of Jasher, which is a history book that the scriptures recommend. So as far as Cush, I don't know much about him. The legend is that he's buried under Elephantine, which is a small island citadel, a very ancient one, um, in the Egypt area, which would kind of make sense. Can you tell us why Ham or Cush was cursed? Yes, it was because of what was happening. In the incident where, see, Noah, basically, it says that he drinks, he goes to sleep, and everybody thinks he gets drunk, but he wakes up, and then all of a sudden he curses Canaan for what Ham did, and they think it's got something to do with a castration or just making fun of him while he's naked or whatever. And the point is, we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls the testaments of the patriarchs. So there is a testament written by Noah about his experiences, and he tells you the rest of the story. And basically, it was after the flood. It was the first time they'd celebrated the feast, and they all used wine to relax and to help them sleep as a medication. They knew drunkenness was a sin, and they didn't practice drunkenness. But anyway, they have the festival. He goes to sleep. He wakes up, and he had had a prophetic dream. And long story short, in the Testament of Noah, it talks about this prophetic dream he had where he could trust only one of his three sons, and that would be Shem. That lets Noah know that he's to be the next Melchizedekian priest and that the Messiah would come through his line. Until that time, he didn't know exactly. So part of the dream is that one of Ham's, or two actually, of Ham's descendants would invade and try to destroy. So at that point, when he has this dream, it sounds like it all happens in 5 minutes, but he sends some spies very carefully to go up to the northern border of his territory. Sure enough, Canaan has already come up and is building a settlement up in Zidon. And so he sends word over to Japheth's group, and sure enough, there's a small war brewing from Hamites up there in that part. So he knows then that the prophecy or the dream is prophetic, because two pieces of it are already happening. And so he, tells Shem and entrusts him, and the rest of it goes on. So because of that, he curses Canaan and Ham. Ham for instigating this takeover and the bringing back of this one world religion that they had pre-flood, which is Nephilim type stuff. And that's actually why Canaan actually goes up all the way and starts a settlement way far north in Zidon, basically in Lebanon, because that's probably the closest seaport he could create to be able to go straight into Mount Hermon. And he's looking for ancient documents, Watcher documents. And that story is mentioned in Jubilees and Enoch in the pre-flood manuscripts. So anyway, but that's what's going on. He's not drunk. He has a prophetic dream. He curses Ham and Canaan, or Canaan specifically because of Ham, because of the invasion that's going on. So it's really interesting to see all the prophecies as we go down through history. Let's see here. Okay. Screen's been a little blurry. If you do a refresh, that might have something to do with it. I'm a little smaller now because of the stuff at the side. And it could be the storm going on too. Let's see here. Heard that the Essenes were in the Knights Templar, the original Christianity, but the Knights were in part involved in secret societies. Is that right? Yeah, you're going to have secret societies throughout history that pull at least legends from all sorts of groups and will say that, this is this way. So like the Masonic Lodge, one of their legends is that they actually go all the way back to the original stonemasons, and stuff like that. And it's basically a legend that they pulled. Some of it may be correct, some of it may not be, but it's kind of irrelevant. The Essenes basically were the Zadok priests and those that followed the Zadok priests that followed the Old Testament as interpreted by the patriarchal writings that said that Messiah would be God incarnate. He would come to die for our sins. It would happen at a certain time, and the age of grace would start immediately thereafter. And there's a whole bunch of other prophecies. And so when the Pharisees started saying, no, Messiah is just a guy, he's just a general that'll lead an army, and that's all there is to it, they would say, no, you're a heretic. You're rejecting Messiah now. That's not what Messiah is. And so the factions began to form. And what's interesting is when you look at the Talmud and see what Orthodox Jews believe, a lot of it contradicts the New Testament. But when you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls and realized what the Zadok priests and the Essenes believed, Essenes were the followers of the priests. Not everyone could do priestly stuff. You'd have to be a direct descendant of Zadok. But the Essenes in general believed basic, what we would call Christian doctrine. It agrees with the New Testament 100%. And it's really amazing for that now to come to light, their history. The 400 silent years is not silent anymore. So it's really interesting. That's what we've been doing on this channel for the last year or so, is going through a lot of the scrolls, comparing the theology and going forward with it. Well, if you can't type or spell very good, I can guarantee I'm worse than you are, especially when it comes to something with an auto-completer. I heard Moses was a ruler under Pharaoh in Elephantine sometime before he ran away from Egypt when he was 40. I might have the details wrong. Yeah, that's mentioned in the book of Jasher. It's also mentioned in Josephus, the account of him taking Elephantine. One of the things was it was a large citadel. It had a moat with deadly poisonous snakes in it. And so you have to guard against the snakes and the arrows coming down. So what Moses did, they couldn't do anything with that. Moses realized from somewhere that there's a certain kind of bird that's immune to the snake's venom. So he goes up and finds the eggs or the baby birds or whatever, basically makes pets out of them. Like people have falcons that'll sit on their arms and go get the prey and then come back. He trained them, and so they went and killed and ate up all the snakes, and then they were able to take Elephantine. It's an interesting story in Josephus. He gives the entire account of the thing. So yeah, there's a lot more interesting information. That does not contradict what Stephen says in the book of Acts, though. Sometimes you look at those and you think, hey, the numbers are different, but they're focusing on different parts, and they actually don't contradict at all. Okay, History Lover says he's got a lot of our books, and it's really helped a lot. Appreciate that. Okay, okay, let's go ahead and stop there for tonight, and we'll come back Thursday with a normal Q&A, like we do, and then next Monday we'll get back to more of the scroll studies, unless something really interesting happens with Hezbollah and Gaza in the meantime. But thank you all for attending, and hope to see you again soon. God bless you all. Have a good night.